Ladies and gentlemen, may I invite you to take your seats, please? Ladies and gentlemen, may I invite you to take your seats, please? We are going to start almost right now. Do be so kind. So, good afternoon, distinguished members of the World Heritage Committee, dear Director Resla, members of the Secretariat and the advisory bodies, ICOMOS, IUCN and ICROM. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm very pleased to welcome you in Kraków, and I do hope you had a pleasant trip to our city, which is my home town. So let's try to feel here in Kraków as at your home. I'm also pleased to open our second orientation session for committee members. As you will remember, we have already held one session last May in UNESCO headquarters in Paris. These meetings allow more opportunities for exchanges and more time for preparation of the session. As you know, orientation sessions are notably dedicated to new committee members and jointly prepared by the World Heritage Center and the three advisory bodies. Its aim is to assist the committee members in the preparation to the committee meeting in the best possible conditions. Such sessions aim to contribute to objective decisions by committee members and are held to familiarize us with the relevant procedures, notions, and topics related to World Heritage. Hence, these orientation sessions are very helpful to help reaching the most appropriate solutions concerning the issues that we will have to address during the next days. Allow me also to recall that in my capacity as chairperson of this very session, I shall be at your disposal for any critical issues which may come up in order to have a constructive dialogue and consensual decision-making process in the accomplishment of our work. I can assure you that you can count on me and on my active assistance and full support. Now, I'm happy to give the floor first to Madame Rezla, Director of the World Heritage Center, and then to Mr. Joe King from ICROM, who will guide us during this session. I will be delighted to welcome you all tonight for the opening ceremony of the 41st session of the World Heritage Committee that will be held from 7:30 p.m. onwards at the opposite side of this very river behind you at the Royal Hill. Do remember. Dr. Rezla, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair, and thank you also for your warm welcome. We are very, very pleased to be here in Poland. It's a very important to have this session. It's a very crucial session to discuss a number of issues, both of procedural nature and of substance nature. So this session should be really used by you, by the committee members, the state party observers, by any other observers here in the room, to ask any questions which you may not be able to ask during the full session or without the context and sometimes political context of the full session of the committee. And in this sense, these exchanges are extremely positive. I would also like to be very frank with you. The chairperson and myself and the whole team are testing this room. So we look where you are all seated, we test the microphones and so.
Sorry to interrupt. We do test the room. We do not test the audience, definitely.
So for us, this session is also very critical. So I don't need to give a long speech. It's really a great pleasure to welcome you on behalf of UNESCO and on behalf of the whole team who is here. Thank you very much.
You.
Okay, thank you very much, Mr. Chair. Actually, just to correct you, there will be an exam later on. We'll be passing out the exam papers for you to take that test later on. Okay. Thank you all. Thank you very much, and I'd like to thank those committee members who are here for this annual orientation session before the 41st session of the World Heritage Committee. The purpose of this orientation session is to allow you, the committee members, to acquaint yourself with some of the procedural issues and logistical issues, and also to remind a bit on some of the key issues in terms of content that you'll be dealing with over the course of this session. And hopefully the information that we can give you will be useful in that sense. Before I begin, I would like to thank particularly Petya Tocharova of the Policy Unit of the World Heritage Center and her staff for helping actually very much in the organization of this orientation session. And I would also like to thank my fellow representatives of the advisory bodies, IUCN and ICOMOS, for their help and for working on the presentations that you will be hearing. We had an orientation session already, as you heard, in May, and that was in Paris. But the way we've now organized the orientation sessions, we've agreed that while we talked more about content issues in May, and in fact we even had some presentations on serial nominations, for example, that the meeting just before the committee, the one that we have right now, the orientation should focus more on logistical issues and procedural issues that you will be dealing with over the course of the next 2 weeks. So there will be sections of this orientation related to procedural and logistical issues. But we will, of course, also still have some content-related issues talking about outstanding universal value and nominations and state of conservation. But what we have done this time, after getting comments back from you, the committee members, is we've also added some case studies coming from states parties to the convention. So we will have 2 case studies to illustrate issues related to nominations and related to state of conservation reports. And those case studies will come in the form of presentations here from the podium, but also from videos that have been prepared for this. So I hope you find this information to be useful, and now I think we can begin. So without going any further, I would now like to turn the floor back over to Mechthild Rossler, the director of the World Heritage Center, who will introduce the venue and to review the agenda and the timetable for this session. Madam Rossler.
Thank you very much. And I think, Joe, we need to also tell everybody that this will be live streamed so that also people in the field and in your countries can follow our debates here. Next slide, please. Is there a PowerPoint presentation? There should be. Where is it? It's good. No, it's already there. I see it behind me. I was looking at the screens, so you see it's a very good test for ourselves. We don't see it in front of us, but you can see it behind us. So that is very interesting, interesting discovery for myself. So what you see on the screen, these are the most important documents, especially for the committee members. You have them all online. The World Heritage Convention, of course, which is the key document on which we base all our considerations, the operational guidelines, which is the 2016 version, and the rules of procedures, which is the 2015 version. Now, can we get the next slide, please? Yes, these are the basic texts of the World Heritage, which include the World Heritage Convention, the guidelines, and the rules of procedure. There are also regular updates being made whenever the committee takes decisions. So at this session, it may take a decision concerning changes to the operational guidelines, which will be then in the updated version. Next slide, please. You have the, I believe this is a photo, is it a photo of Warsaw?
Krakow.
Of Krakow. Yes, I just wondered.
As a matter of fact, it is the city center of medieval Krakow.
The city center, because we don't see anything in front of us on the screen. So this is the web page of the 41st session. So you can go through the menu and you click on documents, and you have actually all the documents for this session. I just informed beforehand the Bureau which are the last documents. And also you have a USB stick, which is in your bag, so you can have it also from your USB stick. On the next slide, you see how the session is organized. We have bureau meetings, so we had today already a bureau meeting, so tomorrow morning, no bureau meeting. The bureau sessions are just behind this room, on the other side, in the theater hall S2. As you know, there is a rule that the bureau shall meet during the sessions of the World Heritage Committee as often as deemed necessary. So the next bureau session will take place on Tuesday morning, not tomorrow. Now, the plenary is every day from 9:30 to 1 o'clock in this room, which is called the auditorium hall. And we just informed the Bureau that there will be 2 working groups, the operational guidelines, which we call the OGs group, taking place in the theater hall, the same room as the Bureau, and the budget group also taking place in the theater hall. Now, you need to know that these 2 groups are consecutive, so they are not in parallel. And I just said to the Bureau, this is quite useful for especially smaller delegations, so that you are not overloaded. And I see Indonesia nodding, because you can also have some lunch. I think that's also very, very important. And then in the afternoon, we have plenary meetings from 3 to 6:30 here in this very room. We have a lot of side events, so they take place during lunchtime or in the evening, but we will come back to that. If I may, Mr. Chair, we now go to the agenda and the timetable. You find the agenda of this meeting in document 3A. There have been no changes since the committee discussed this agenda last year. The most important document, I always feel, is the timetable, because then you know approximately when the different items happen, which is document 3B, which will be both agenda and timetable adopted by the World Heritage Committee tomorrow morning. And then the other document, which is absolutely critical for you, is document in 3A Ref. As you can see from the document code, this document has been revised because there were some new documents which were added. And this document is very useful for you, so you can check whether you have all the documents which are listed in this list of documents at hand. And if there's anything, please approach the Secretariat if you cannot find a certain document. But we try to make these sessions paper-free, so everything you have available on our very extensive webpage. Now, a question which is very important for many people in the room here, which is the question of the order of discussions. Can we have the next slide, please? Yes. Yes. Okay, so the order of state of conservation, which we call SOC, state of conservation discussion, is we start with the natural sites, then we go to the mixed, and then we go to the cultural sites. And the order goes by the regions, which is then Europe and North America, Latin America, Africa, Arab states, and Asia Pacific. As you know, to be fair to all the regions of the world, we change per year, so this is the order of the discussions of state of conservation. As you know, state of conservation is the first big item taking place on Tuesday and Wednesday this week, and Thursday, while the nomination starts on Friday morning. Now, the order of nominations, you see it here, again, natural, mixed, and then cultural nominations. And for nominations, we start with Africa, then the Arab region, Asia Pacific, Europe, North America, and then Latin America. So that's very important. We have informed all the states already on the information meeting we did on the 23rd of May, so that everybody has the same information, and our PowerPoints from that meeting were also uploaded. Now, next slide, please. We have also a number of side events and exhibitions which take place every time during the lunch break and in the evening. So from 1 to 3 or from 6:30 to 8:30. And there are a number of side event rooms. For those who are organizing side events, or if you wish to attend, it's best to also have a look where these are located. It's a little bit a complicated building to go from one level to the other. So, wandering around, you will also see some of the very nice exhibitions, so I strongly recommend that. Next slide, please. We will inform you of these side events and exhibitions also on a daily basis, also on the screens outside. And we have about 25 side events, then 20 side events organized by the advisory bodies, and I think 5 or 6 exhibitions. Yeah, 5 exhibitions. Okay. Now, maybe, Mr. Chair, if there are any other announcements to be made, somebody from the Polish team could make an announcement. No?
Not really. as you
Not really?
understand.
Okay.
I wonder if
she's
Dr.
here.
Piotrowska would
Yes.
like to.
Come here on the podium
Yes.
to announce it. Or, yeah.
We shall see.
I think it's a good opportunity.
We shall see all the most important person we rely on during those 10 days.
Thank you,
Dr.
Mr. Chair.
Piotrowska, the floor is yours. The floor is yours.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I apologize. It's a really testing time for us. We are checking all the technical equipment, whether it works or not. Some, maybe just for today, the logistical announcement and the organization of the whole venue. As you probably noticed, the building is new, is beautiful, but it's a little bit complicated to find yourself in a right time, in a right place for your convenience. And just to help to orientate, we, together with your badges, you received plans of the building, so please study them. They will help you to find yourself in a proper place. Another logistical information, you can also find quite a lot of wayfinding helps on different floors. So also rely on them. They should guide you to the right place where you want to end up. Speaking about logistic and transport, you have a free public transport for the whole duration of the session. If you want to use it, take your badge. There is a little hologram, and that's the thing which says to those who control whether people are in the buses with the tickets or not, whether they are allowed to be there or not. So take them with you. You can enter every public transport within Kraków, and as far as I know, agglomeration as well. You can check it too. For today, for the opening ceremony, there will be buses coming from the venue to the Wawel Hill, because as you know, the opening ceremony is in a different place, at the heart of Poland, as we say, the Wawel Hill. You can walk there. It's about 15 minutes. You can take the buses. They will start 6:30. From here, there will be people guiding you, helping you to find the way to them. And after the ceremony, which will and we think about 10 p.m. Or later, there will be also buses taking you to hotels. There are 3 different routes, so take a note. They will be marked properly, so some of them will help you to get to your hotels. They will start at 6:30, and they will be just going round from this place to the Wawel Hill. Going for the opening ceremony, please do not forget to have your invitation. Only those who are having invitation will be allowed to enter the Wawel Hill. Fortunately or unfortunately, we have very strict security procedures, so if you won't have your invitation, you won't be allowed to enter the hill. The opening ceremony will start with speeches as always. Then we have a concert which will be followed by a reception. If you have any questions concerning today's logistic and the venue as such, that there will be people available, just ask. There is a quite big information desk. You can ask about the timetable, what's going on in the hall. You can ask about site events, the information. In addition to what is on the screens, there will be also people guiding you what happens and when. There will be also information on excursions or tours whenever you want to go somewhere or pick up some of our proposal. There will be also information available and updated for your convenience. I'm sorry, maybe I'm giving too much information at this point, but I was just doing something different. That's all right. So if anything else, please ask. I will respond to your question as proper as possible. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm pretty sure that the message was clear and, of course, important. Thank you very much indeed. And the floor goes back to Ikram, to Joe King. The floor is yours.
Thank you, sir. And indeed, actually, this is an orientation session, and I hope that that explanation helped orient everyone toward what they'll be doing tonight and for the rest of the week. Okay, our next presentation is going to be a discussion or a presentation on the working groups that will be taking place this week, and Petja will be making that presentation. So I'll give the floor to Petja.
Thank you very much, Joe. And what about the working groups? As every year and as per standard practice, we'll have the two working groups that will be constituted, normally should be constituted tomorrow. The budget working group will be reconducted, and all operational guidelines working group should be constituted. These are groups which consultative bodies which can comprise not only committee members, but they're open to states parties which are not committee members and other observers. What are the key issues? If we go to the budget group, what are the key issues of the budget group? As you know, the budget group is dealing with the budget, with the World Heritage Fund, with the accounts of the fund and the implementation of the activities. And of course, this one of the important issues to be discussed is the sustainability of the World Heritage Fund, which has also been a central item to be discussed by the ad hoc working groups throughout the year. When will the meetings of the budget working group will they take place? As was mentioned by the director of the center, it has been decided, and it has become a practice, if we can call it so, since last year, that they last not more than 3 days, and they are consecutive, and they don't take place, the two groups, at the same time. So the first group, the budget group, will take place on, will meet on Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, that is 4th through 6th July, from 14 to 15, that is from 2 p.m. to 3 p.m. Where is the room? That's the theater hall. And in order to orient yourselves, also you can call it the bureau room, because this is also the room where the bureau meets. And it's also called room number 2, or S2. What about the operational guidelines working group? Normally it's scheduled to meet also during 3 days, 1 hour each day, from 2 p.m. to 3 p.m. in the same room, theater hall, bureau meeting, or S2. The key issues of the operational guidelines group, that will be paragraph 68 on tentative lists, which has been discussed throughout the year by the ad hoc working group. It was in the mandate of this group, and the periodic reporting changes to the operational guidelines and its annex will be on its agenda. So this is the information about the working group.
Okay, thank you very much. And actually, since you continue to have the floor, you're going to next be presenting procedural matters and conduct of the committee. What I will do is I will let Petya make the next presentation, and then I will open the floor up for questions in relation to any of the things that we've heard up until now in relation to the venue and the procedural issues. Petya.
Thanks, Joe. Yes. What about the procedural matters and conduct of the committee session? Of course, the more the session approaches, the more important it becomes to refresh our knowledge about procedural matters. If you remember, we did not have such an item during our orientation session in May, but now it is important to remind certain basic rules or more sophisticated and detailed rules. It would be very important for all committee members to have in front of yourself or with yourself on the screens of your computers the rules of procedure of the committee, le règlement du comité. And this you can find, of course, on the website, and you can have it in electronic format. But you also have the basic texts, and this is if some of the committee members do not have a copy of the basic text or haven't brought it with themselves, please note that we have a limited number of copies available for the committee members. And there you will find not only the convention and the operational guidelines, but you'll find also the rules of procedure. And you can note that it's on page 193 of the basic texts. And pour la version française, c'est la page 203. C'est le règlement du comité. A few important elements to recall before we go into a full-fledged committee session. And of course, as was mentioned by Joe King, don't hesitate to get back to us if you need any further clarifications on those matters. And if we go to next slide, it's really the basic information. As you can see, you have Rule 14, Rule 15, 15.1 on the duties of the chairperson. And they are well described, the duties of the chairperson, vice chairpersons, and the rapporteur in Rule 14. There is a special rule in Rule 15 concerning the replacement of the chairperson. That's important to retain. If the chairperson is unable to act at any session of the committee or bureau or part thereof, his function shall be exercised by a vice chairperson in the English alphabetical order of states parties of the bureau, commencing with the country of the chairperson.
Where is Portugal?
So the next, the country in the English alphabetical order, which follows the host country, is Portugal, and then it's the Republic of Korea.
Sorry to interrupt you. I shall just express my gratitude well in advance.
What is the role of, if we continue, what is the role of the rapporteur? It's also described in Rule 14, that is Rule 14.4, and the rapporteur shall certify that the Secretariat has accurately recorded the committee decisions. This is in addition to exercising the powers which can be otherwise conferred upon him elsewhere by the present rules. And of course, he shall work together with the Secretariat to monitor and record committee debate and amendments. This is a very, very important task, ensuring that the session goes in the best possible way. And if we go to the next slide, we'll go to another important element: speaking order and time limit. These are questions that we very often get before the session, between the sessions, and so on. About taking the floor, it's what's the order of taking the floor? First, committee members, then advisory bodies, then states party observers, and then NGOs and IGOs and other observers. That is the standard order. And you have those rules of 22, and the chairperson is the one that shall call upon speakers in the order in which they signify their wish to speak, of course, taking into account the order of speaking. Some important rules to be reminded, and let us remind the rule 22.6. We really would like to draw your attention. This is an important one. States parties shall not speak about world heritage properties in their own territories, except at the explicit invitation of the chairperson, within the allowed time for their speech and in response to specific questions posed. In response to specific questions posed. Another rule is contained in the next slide, which is 22.7. And this is a rule that was adopted, or how would I say, amended, I think 2 years ago at the session in Bonn, that the representatives of a state party, whether or not a member of the committee, may be invited by the chairperson to present their views after the advisory bodies have presented their evaluation of sites proposed for inscription. And this presentation shall be limited to a clarification or an update on the proposed site. In other words, it cannot concern advocacy. If we go to the next slide, we'll know how much committee members and observers can speak, what is the time limit, in order to ensure a good time management. As per usual practice, it is 3 minutes for committee members and 2 minutes by observers. You see also on the slide that this will be managed, those operations will be managed by a timer and a sound. Another important element, quorum and points of order. It's paragraph Article 17. At plenary meetings, a quorum shall consist of a majority of the state's members of the committee. During a discussion, any state member may raise a point of order. Such point of order shall be immediately decided upon by the chairperson. So, the quorum shall consist of a majority of the state's members of the committee, which means that you should be at least 11, 50 plus 1.
We have 12 at the moment.
As long as it's not a formal session, I think we could
Sorry to
proceed.
interrupt you.
Then you have a few provisions in the rules of procedure on working groups, consultative and subsidiary bodies. We already touched upon this in the previous presentation by Dr. Rossler and when presenting the working groups. And you know that the committee may create such consultative bodies as it deems necessary to perform its functions. And these consultative bodies may include committee members and I'm sorry, and non-committee members. As opposed to consultative bodies, subsidiary bodies that can also be established by the committee when it deems necessary for the conduct of its work, may be constituted only from amongst state members of the committee. This is the difference between consultative and subsidiary bodies, and we are talking here about Articles 20 and 21. We come to the next slide on amendments, and that's a crucial one. And I'm sure all of you will study it in further detail, and we'll be pleased to provide any additional information as to how this works and how amendments work. And you can find all the information about amendments in Article 23. It's 1, 2, 3, and so on. So, at the request of any member of the committee supported by 2 other members, discussion of any motion, resolution, or amendment may be suspended until the written text is circulated, and so on and so forth. I think it's kind of more easy to explain if we see the next slide, and you'd all remember the blue form. in case of an amendment to the draft decision, look at the blue form. It's available, first of all, it's available in the room. It can also be sent by email. You can see the email of the rapporteur just down there, wh-rapporteur@unesco.org. And please, this is to be noted for whenever you'll have amendments. It's one form per amendment. We cannot have two draft decisions or amendments to two draft decisions in the same form. The amendments can be submitted by in hard copy to the rapporteur or by email to the rapporteur. So this is the blue forms, and it's important to know one form per amendment. In case, now, if we go to the next slide, in case of multiple amendments on the same decision, all must be submitted to the rapporteur on blue forms. There might be amendments from different committee members, and they all must be submitted in a certain order. After the rapporteur's agreement, the Secretariat will integrate the amendments into the draft decision in both languages, in track changes, for distribution to the committee members. And let's say it will look more or less a decision if there are amendments to the decision. This is how the amended draft decision will look like. But you certainly remember that from the previous committees. Any refreshment on procedures would, any request for refreshment of those procedures, of course, will be met by the team of the World Heritage Center, and you'll receive the necessary explanations. And that much about amendments, unless you'll have questions further on. And voting procedure, that's another issue that can be a reason for raising questions and looking for clarifications. The voting procedure, it's chapter 7 of the rules of procedure of the World Heritage Committee, which basically defines the voting rights in rule, in rule 35. Each member of the committee will have one vote in the committee. Rule 36 explains the conduct during voting. After the chairperson, and that's important to know, that after the chairperson has announced the beginning of a voting, no one shall interrupt the voting except on a point of order in connection with the actual conduct of the vote. Then the question of majority is also an important one. Let me recall the two types of majority, the two categories of majority, the two-thirds majority. Which are the matters that for which a so-called qualified majority is needed? These are the matters covered by the provisions of the Convention. Decisions on those matters will be taken by a majority of two-thirds of the members present and voting. And present and voting is also important to understand, because these are those that have been present, that have voted, that have not abstained. Simple majority in any other case, with the exception of Rule 37. The matters covered by the provisions of the Convention, two-thirds majority. Any other matter not covered by the provisions of the Convention, simple majority of the states members present and voting. In this regard, let me remind Rule 38.2, which is closely related to 37 and 38.1, as to the question which matters, whether a particular matter is covered by the provisions of the conventions, and therefore decisions are to be taken by two-thirds majority, or qualified majority, and decisions on any other matters not covered by the rules shall be taken by a majority of the states parties present and voting. That is, if there is a doubt whether a matter is covered by the provisions of the conventions and therefore requires qualified majority, or whether this is a matter which requires simple majority, can be voted on by the committee, and the majority needed for this question is a simple majority of the members present. What is members present and voting? Next slide. Shall mean states, that would mean states casting an affirmative or negative vote. Therefore, states members abstaining from voting or not present in the room at all shall be regarded as not voting. That is, if we have 20 people present in the room and 3 of them abstain, we'll have only 17 state parties which will be regarded as present and voting. I think we're getting towards the end of that. Explanation voting procedure by show of hands. That is Article 60. So that is in a way, one of the ways to vote, one of the procedures for voting by show of hands. If a vote by show of hands is in doubt, the chairperson may take a second vote by a roll call, and such a roll call can be taken if requested by not less than 2 states members of the committee before the voting takes place. And if we go to the next slide, another voting procedure is the secret ballot, and such a decision can be voted by secret ballot whenever 2 or more states members of the committee request so, or the chairperson so decide. And this is paragraph Article 41. We have a picture. I don't remember whether this is. This is a picture, I think. Is it Istanbul or Bonn?
No, it's Doha.
Oh, it's even Doha. We are getting back to the 38th session. We're getting back to the 38th session. It's just an illustration. And then the next slide is the describes the conduct of voting by secret ballot. If the chairperson so decide, or if so requested by 2 or more committee members, so tellers are needed, and they have to be appointed from amongst the delegations of the members of the committee in order to scrutinize the vote. How they have to, when the counting is completed and the tellers have reported to the chairperson, he shall announce the result of the ballot, bearing in mind the vote will be recorded as follows. And it will look like this in the next slide. From the total number of members of the committee will be deducted A, the number of members absent, if any, the number of blank ballot papers, if any, and the number of invalid ballot papers, if any. The remaining number will constitute the number of votes recorded. And an example of a simple majority, 20 votes recorded, 11 required for the proposal to pass, and it means that the simple majority with the 11, that is plus 1. The qualified majority in the next slide. If we have 20 votes recorded, there would be 14 required for the proposal to pass, and then therefore the required majority will be, 1333. So it's 14 required for the proposal. And basically, I think that constitutes an explanation of the main procedures and main issues But we do encourage you, committee members, and of course, states parties observers, to review the procedures of the rules of procedure, and don't hesitate to get back to us. And also, when the legal advisor would be here, you can always consult us on issues that you may have questions with regard. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Petja. I think that's actually a very useful presentation. You will be definitely facing some of these issues over the course of the next 2 weeks in terms of order of speaking, in terms of how to vote. So although it's maybe not the most scintillating discussion in the world, it is something that's very important for you as committee members to know. At this point, I want to pause and I want to turn the floor over to you and ask if any committee members have any questions in relation to any of the procedural or logistic issues, working groups, speaking order, amendments, voting procedures, or any of the other key issues that you've heard about in this first part of the presentation. So I'll open the floor up to committee members in case there are specific questions in relation to these procedural issues. I see Kuwait would like to ask a question, so I'll give the floor over to you.
Merci bien. C'est une demande, ce n'est pas une question. Concernant l'observateur pour l'installation dans les salles, j'aimerais bien, on fait comme l'année précédente, par tirage au sort, et on a de confiance et on compte sur vous. Vous faites ça, j'espère. Merci.
Okay. All right. Thank you. We'll pass that on to the chair. It can be discussed. Any other questions or issues that may be arising in relation to these procedural issues? Petja.
Je suis pas, merci. Je suis pas sûre d'avoir bien compris votre question. Si vous pouvez, le tirage au sort dans quel contexte?
Pour l'installation, pour rester l'observateur. Concernant l'observateur, les gens observateurs, ils vont venir. Normalement, on n'aime pas A, B, C, D. Vous mettez le tirage au sort. On compte sur vous. C'est vous, vous faites ça.
D'accord, on n'avait pas bien compris si ça concernait la procédure ou une autre question. D'accord, c'est bien noté.
I think actually, if I may, I think generally they're recognized by when they wish to take the floor, when they raise their cards is usually the order that they go in. So it's usually done by if one observer raises their card first and another. So it's usually done on that basis rather than specifically alphabetical. But we can raise that with the chairperson and clarify that for you, I think. Any other questions or comments from the committee? I don't see any. Okay. So that was very clear then, and I thank the presenters from the World Heritage Center and also from the host country Poland for those presentations outlining the various procedural and logistic issues. So now we will move into our second phase, let's say, of this orientation session, talking more about, let's call them the content issues that you'll be facing in relation to what is outstanding universal value, issues related to nominations, and issues related to state of conservation reports. The first presentation will be made actually by me. Just to remind the committee about the issue of outstanding universal value. This is a presentation that I know everyone has seen me make before, so in some ways I will apologize for that, but in some ways I actually won't apologize for that, because the concept of outstanding universal value is at the base of the convention, it is the heart of the convention, and I think it's something very important before each committee meeting for committee members to remember what is outstanding universal value and what does it consist of, and almost all of the decisions that you will be making in relation to inscriptions, in relation to state of conservation reporting in relation to a variety of things must be based on this issue of outstanding universal value. And so I do think it's important to just run through this in a quick way. Next slide, please. And this is just to give an overview of some sites with outstanding universal value. Next slide, please. So, as some of you know, when I begin talking about outstanding universal value, I always start off by talking about really what is the aim of the convention. And although we call it the World Heritage Convention, the name of the convention is the Convention Concerning the Protection of the World's Cultural and Natural Heritage. And I think that it's important to call attention to that because in the end, the whole concept of outstanding universal value is wrapped around the idea of protection of sites that are identified as having OUV. And therefore, I think the concept of protection is really the most important thing that we need to think about when we are identifying sites, when we are protecting or conserving them, when we are presenting them, and essentially when we are transmitting those sites to future generations. So it's really, I underline the concept of protection of the world's cultural and natural property. Next slide, please. The convention itself, of course, does not define specifically what outstanding universal value is. It actually says that it's up to the committee to determine what the criteria are. And as you know, the committee has identified 10 criteria which constitute the criteria for meeting the idea of outstanding universal value. But in 2005, we did put within the operational guidelines a small definition of what is outstanding universal value. And as you all know, of course, it means heritage, cultural and natural heritage of cultural or natural significance, which is so significant as to transcend national boundaries and be of common importance for present and future generations. And again, it goes on to talk about the importance of the protection. The next, I won't read the whole thing, but it goes on to talk about the protection of those properties and the importance of protection. And again, the last sentence says that it's the committee that defines the criteria for inscription of properties on the World Heritage List. Next slide, please. I know you're all familiar with this slide, and actually we've seen another interesting slide recently that we'll substitute next year. Actually, an actual picture of an actual site with this configuration. So we'll show that next year. But the important thing is to mention that outstanding universal value is underpinned by three aspects, let's call it. It's not just meeting the criteria, but it's also meeting the conditions of integrity and authenticity for cultural sites, integrity for both cultural and natural sites. And again, the issue of protection and management is also an important aspect of holding up, let's say, the concept of outstanding universal value. Next slide, please. And again, you've seen this slide in the past also, but just to remind you that without the protection and management aspects being met, outstanding universal value does not hold. So it is important to recognize that you need all three of those pillars, not two of them, but all three of those pillars in order for you, the committee, to determine that something has outstanding universal value. So when you are determining whether to inscribe a site on the World Heritage List, it is just as important to ensure that it has protection and management as it is important to determine that it meets the criteria and that it has integrity for both cultural and natural sites and authenticity for cultural sites. Next slide, please. Here's an example, which I'm actually not going to read this because again, you've seen this before, but in determining the outstanding universal value of a property, there is a statement of outstanding universal value, and that statement of outstanding universal value has a brief synthesis. It describes the criteria, it describes the authenticity and integrity, and it does describe the protection. So, so it's important to point out that that statement of outstanding universal value is an important statement because it becomes the basis from which the site is eventually managed by the state party, which has put the site on the World Heritage List. This statement of outstanding universal value will lay out a series of things, including the attributes which are carrying the values of the site. So here you can see in the first slide, this is a mixed site, a cultural and natural site, and the statement of outstanding universal value talks about the natural characteristics, the mountains, the peaks, the glaciers, the lakes, and all of the various, the biodiversity, all of the various things that go into the attributes that carry the values of this particular property. So you'll find that in the brief synthesis. Next slide. We can go on again. Next slide. And then what it will do is it will lay out one paragraph for each of the criteria. In this case, as I mentioned, it's a mixed site, so it has cultural criteria and natural criteria. So these are the cultural criteria. Next slide. And these would then be the natural criteria for which the site was inscribed. Next slide. And because it's because it's a mixed site, it has to meet in the conditions of both integrity and authenticity. Integrity meaning that the property is complete, it's whole. It means that it's free from negative developments. It means that all of the necessary elements are contained within the property, and that the property is large enough to be able to hold all of the aspects that are necessary for the outstanding universal value of that property. Next slide. And in this case, because it's also a cultural site, it needs to have authenticity. What we mean by authenticity is whether it truthfully or honestly reflects those values in the attributes that are within the property. Next slide, please. And then finally, the statement of outstanding universal value will lay out the protection of that property. So it will talk about the general protection, the legal framework, and the management framework. It will also give a brief explanation of the human resources and the financial resources that are necessary, and also the monitoring aspects that will be necessary at that site. And then finally, it will also look and identify what are some of the long-term key threats to the site, and what are some of the threats or issues that need to be dealt with in the long term. So in some sites, for example, one of the key threats might be tourism. So therefore, the management of tourism at that particular property might be of importance due to let's say, the fragility of the site. In other sites, it might actually be the physical fragility of the materials themselves. Or in some cases, it could be it could be other issues also. But in any event, the statement of outstanding universal value should look at all of the key threats and describe how those threats are going to be met with and managed over the course of the foreseeable future. Next slide. I think that's the last one. Yes. So that is what outstanding universal value essentially encompasses. And again, as I said, it's very important for you when you take decisions, both at the level of nominations, but also when you're looking at the state of conservation of properties, to determine that the properties have all of those aspects, that they meet the criteria, that they have authenticity, that they have integrity, and that they have proper management and they have proper protection, and that should be the basis or the underpinning of the decisions that you'll be taking over the course of the next 2 weeks. So with that, I will close here, and I will just ask if there are any questions from the committee before we move on to the nomination process. I don't see any questions at the moment, so if that's the case, I will move on to the nomination process, and I would like to give the word to my good friend Alessandro Balsamo from the World Heritage Center, who is going to introduce the nominations that you will be hearing for this year in 2017 and the related documentation for those nominations. Alessandro.
Thank you very much, Joe. Just a few slides on the nomination that the committee will examine at this session. Next slide, please. We will, as was said before, we have 33 nominations, among which 6 are natural, 1 mixed, and 26 are cultural. 23 of these nominations are new nominations, and one is a nomination to be processed on an emergency basis. 5 are significant boundary modification, and 5 are deferred or referred nomination. So far, there are 6 nominations that were withdrawn. There is still time eventually to receive other withdrawals until basically just before the nomination is examined. So we will see if we receive some other withdrawal. And beside the nomination, we have 13 minor boundary modification. Next slide. We can see this same results in the form of a table, and we see that out of the 33 nominations to examine, there are 17 which are with a positive recommendation, 13 for inscription and 4 approved extension. So almost 50%, beside 50% of the nomination to examine have a positive recommendation. Next slide, we can see also the same results in terms of different regions and how these inscriptions, referral, deferral, or non-inscription distribute to the different regions. Next slide. Very important, the order of discussion of nominations. This year we will begin with the nomination to be examined that will submit on an emergency basis. Then we go to natural, and we have 7 nominations, 1 for the mixed site, and then we go to the cultural site. After then, we have 13 minor boundary modification, which will be examined in the opposite orders, meaning beginning by cultural, then mixed and natural. And this is, of course, because of logistical question and to save time and in not changing the podium. We always do like that. We go to next slide, and we talk about related documentation. Next slide, thank you. And we can see that in the dedicated page of a website of the 41st session of the committee, we have a folder where you can find the nominations. Next slide. But not only nomination, of course, every information relating to this nomination is available, including the evaluation of the advisory bodies and the related working document, including the draft decision. Next slide. And this is just to show you exactly where you can find this folder on nomination on our page. Next slide. And for each nomination, you have the full documentation officially submitted for this nomination, including additional information submitted during the 1.5 years of evaluation process. And with this, I give the floor back to Joe.
Okay, thank you very much, Alessandro. I will now give the floor to ICOMOS, to Gwen, who will talk about the requirements for inscription on the World Heritage List.
Merci Joe. Donc, je vais vous présenter les conditions requises pour l'inscription d'un bien sur la liste du patrimoine mondial. Diapo suivante, s'il vous plaît. Donc, les organisations consultatives qui réalisent une étude scientifique des propositions d'inscription évaluent dans quelle mesure les biens proposés pour inscription remplissent les conditions de valeur universelle exceptionnelle, comme on vous l'a déjà expliqué, telles que définies par les orientations, et ce en termes de critères d'inscription, d'intégrité et d'authenticité, de protection et de gestion. La Convention du patrimoine mondial est une convention de site. Ce sont donc bien des biens qu'on inscrit sur la liste du patrimoine mondial. Ces biens expriment une valeur universelle exceptionnelle et ce sont les attributs qui sont porteurs de cette valeur universelle exceptionnelle. Les attributs sont des éléments physiques et des aspects tangibles ou intangibles ou des processus du bien qui manifestent sa valeur universelle exceptionnelle. Diapo suivante. L'inscription d'un bien sur la liste du patrimoine mondial est recommandée par les organisations consultatives lorsque les conditions suivantes sont remplies. L'analyse comparative a été considérée satisfaisante dans la mesure où elle a démontré la façon dont le bien se distingue par rapport à d'autres exemples similaires dans la même ère géoculturelle. Et elle a permis d'appréhender l'importance du bien dans son contexte national et international. Les organisations consultatives s'appuient, en complément des informations du dossier de proposition d'inscription, sur les recherches scientifiques et les études thématiques qui sont disponibles pour évaluer l'adéquation de l'analyse comparative. En ce qui concerne les critères, un ou plusieurs, ou même l'ensemble des critères culturels et ou naturels ont été justifiés. Les conditions d'intégrité ont été démontrées si tous les éléments nécessaires à l'expression de la valeur universelle exceptionnelle proposée ont été inclus dans les délimitations du bien. Si celui-ci est d'une taille suffisante pour représenter les éléments et processus qui expriment cette valeur, et si finalement le bien n'a pas souffert d'impact négatif dû au développement ou à l'abandon. Un paysage agro-industriel, par exemple, devra inclure les éléments qui contribuent à dépeindre les principaux facteurs géographiques, technologiques et socio-historiques qui ont rendu possible son établissement et son développement. Pour les biens culturels uniquement, les conditions d'authenticité ont été remplies si les valeurs mises en avant sont exprimées de manière véridique et crédible à travers une variété d'attributs. L'ICOMOS vérifie dans quelle mesure les sources d'information témoignent de façon véridique de la valeur du bien. Donc, pour un site archéologique, par exemple, l'ICOMOS considérera comment les vestiges matériels du bien, associés aux nombreuses informations qui ont été obtenues grâce aux recherches archéologiques conduites sur le site, ainsi qu'aux dépôts enfouis, apportent un témoignage crédible à l'appui de l'importance de la culture qui a bâti le bien. Diapo suivante. Les conditions suivantes doivent également être remplies pour justifier l'inscription. Les délimitations sont considérées satisfaisantes si elles incluent tous les éléments qui contribuent à la valeur universelle exceptionnelle du bien, si elles comprennent des zones qui, à la lumière de recherches futures, permettraient d'accroître sa compréhension et si elles ont été clairement délimitées. Elles peuvent coïncider avec des zones protégées. Les zones tampons doivent assurer un surcroît de protection au bien. La protection est adéquate si le bien est protégé de façon réglementaire au niveau national, régional, municipal et ou traditionnel, et de préférence au plus haut niveau possible. L'ensemble du bien et ses attributs doivent faire l'objet d'une protection. Les mesures de protection doivent permettre de protéger le bien des menaces qui peuvent peser sur lui et donc être mises en œuvre et jugées efficaces sur le terrain. Les mesures de conservation mises en place sont satisfaisantes dans la mesure où elles permettent de maintenir les valeurs du bien ainsi que les conditions d'intégrité et d'authenticité. Et finalement, la gestion est considérée appropriée si elle s'appuie sur une compréhension claire de la valeur universelle exceptionnelle et de ses attributs, si elle définit la façon dont celle-ci sera préservée dans le futur et si elle permet de gérer les changements de manière efficace. Diapo suivante. Un bien peut échouer sur l'un ou l'autre de ces aspects. Il peut avoir une importance universelle, mais une protection et gestion qui ne sont pas satisfaisantes. À l'inverse, il peut être bien protégé et géré, mais ne pas avoir démontré une importance universelle exceptionnelle. La non-réalisation de certaines des conditions précisées précédemment doit conduire à proposer d'autres recommandations que l'inscription. Ce sont bien l'ensemble de ces conditions, telles qu'elles sont définies par les orientations, qui doivent être réunies afin de permettre l'inscription d'un bien sur la liste. Les organisations consultatives peuvent être amenées à faire des recommandations additionnelles mais l'inscription n'est pas conditionnelle à leur réalisation. Ces recommandations sont perçues comme des orientations utiles pour la prise en compte de questions pour le futur du bien. Diapo suivante. Finalement, les organisations consultatives agissent dans l'intérêt de la conservation des biens. Cela signifie que parfois, il est recommandé que plus de temps soit accordé pour permettre l'inscription sur la liste. Je vous remercie.
Yes. Okay, thank you very much, Gwenelle, for that description of the basic necessary qualifications for the OUV. What I'd now like to do is turn the floor over to Tim Badman, who will talk specifically about the evaluation process of the advisory bodies. Just to be clear, the questions for the nominations will come at the end of the presentations on the nominations. So if you have questions, hold them.
Okay, so thank you, Joe, and thank you, Chairperson, for your warm welcome and this orientation session, and also for this amazing space we're meeting in. It seems to me we should have the option to sing the interventions and not just speak them in this beautiful theatre. If I can just complement the presentation that's been made by ECOMOS to speak to the process the advisory bodies go through, and I'll ask for the next slide, please. So we're just going to take you through the way we develop the recommendations that are presented to the committee. The first point to make is that you've already seen this slide presented by Joe King, and we make our recommendations strictly within the framework of the Convention's operational guidelines that have been explained, and we're required in the operational guidelines to be as rigorous as possible in the advice that we give you. So you set the rules and the framework for us to give our advice, and we give our advice within that framework. Next slide, please. These are all principles that IUCN has for our evaluations, and all of this presentation, although it focuses on the IUCN evaluation, you can say that the same principles apply to the way ECOMOS evaluates cultural sites. So the first principle is that we try to set the highest standards we can to give you independent expert advice that is consistent with the operational guidelines. The second is this is a partnership exercise, so the World Heritage Centre and ECOMOS and sometimes ICCROM play their roles in supporting our evaluations, but we do also reach out in particular with support from UN Environment's World Conservation Monitoring Centre to back up the science that underpins in particular our biodiversity assessments. We see as IUCN that World Heritage Sites are the most significant protected areas that have been identified in our planet, on our planet. And so we make no apology for also expecting that they demonstrate the highest standards when they are considered for inscription, because they really do have a flagship role to show what good conservation should look like for wider practice, not just within the World Heritage Convention. And lastly, IUCN makes use of our extensive scientific networks. I'd like to acknowledge the World Commission on Protected Areas and also our specialist commission, the Species Survival Commission, that deals with the conservation of threatened species, but also partners that support us in evaluating geological sites, the Union for Geological Sciences and the International Association for Geomorphologists, and we bring science from these wide networks into our work when we present our advice to you. Next slide, please. Next slide, please. Thank you. So the slide you see here is the diagram that presents IUCN's evaluation process that is included in the relevant annex of the operational guidelines. And this, in the first place, I think gives you a transparent explanation of how the advice that the advisory bodies give you is developed. And I'd like to note that this process is also something which has been discussed at length through the ad hoc working group and with the committee. So this process is something that was agreed and revised the last time in Bonn 2 years ago at the committee, and it is something which represents an agreed way of working between us and the committee. If I just ask for the next slide, the key point in this whole process, sorry, next slide, please. Somebody could move the slide, please. Sorry, next slide.
Can we have the slide change?
Sorry, if you could just go back one slide, sorry, maybe there's one missing. The key point which, sorry, just if you could go to the previous slide, forgive me. Okay. So it's not showing, but if you just see the note that says progress report, if you see on this diagram that the work that we do is vested in a panel, and the panel provides the assurance that the advice that you receive from us is independent from any other consideration that IUCN might have in its evaluation process. Next slide, please. Just to show you what that looks like in practice, so here you see pictures of both the IUCN and the ICOMOS panels in action, and the memberships of these panels is now open, freely available, so if you'd like to know who is involved in this process, you can find that on both IUCN and ICOMOS's website. Next slide, please. And just to make the point that when the panels present their advice, they're drawing in the case of every evaluation on field missions that have gone to undertake a visit to each site that's been nominated and had a program of that visit that's been jointly agreed with the nominating state party or states parties to be able to do justice to the extent possible in a one-week visit to really understand on the ground the values of the site, the integrity, authenticity, the protection and management, and the way that stakeholders and partners support and have views on the nomination. Next slide, please. In the process, we also then have extensive dialogue and discussion with states parties. This, I confess, is a dialogue about state of conservation, but we have meetings such as this one with Australia, with essentially every state party that wishes to speak to us during the evaluation process. And that these days is essentially almost every nominating state party where we've had the chance to exchange and meet, either with meetings in Paris at UNESCO or at our offices, in our case in Switzerland. Next slide, please. And this is the last slide, which is to make the point that we set great store beyond the dialogue with states parties, but also ensuring that we have a dialogue with partners and stakeholders in nominations. It's increasingly the case that civil society has views that they express to us directly about nominations. Very occasionally there can also be nominations where proposals from states parties are contested by communities or affected peoples. So we just make the last comment that when we're evaluating nominations, we really expect to understand the way in which the nomination that's made is working with the community, working with stakeholders and rights holders, and we now also report that to the committee for their attention. Thank you, Joe. That concludes the presentation of the evaluation process.
Okay, thank you very much, Tim. So now you've heard the basic requirements for the inscription and how the advisory bodies then actually go about their evaluation processes. Now what I'd like to do is turn the floor back over to Alessandro Balsamo to talk a little bit more specifically about the role that you as committee members will now have in determining the status of properties that are being proposed for inscription. So I'll give the floor to Alessandro.
Thank you, Joe. Even if probably at this moment of the afternoon you would like to have a coffee break, but I will talk you about the role of the World Heritage Committee instead, hoping to catch your attention for a few minutes, a few seconds. Next slide. So basically the decision of the committee should be based on objective and scientific consideration. This is what it says, the paragraph 23 of the operational guidelines. And the committee recognized that this decision depends upon carefully prepared documentation, so means reading all the related documents in case of nomination. If the nomination text, as well as the evaluation of the advisory body. Thorough and consistent procedures, so that we try to keep with respecting what are the provision of the operational guidelines, and the evaluation of by qualified expert. Of course, this is evaluation of the advisory bodies, and if necessary, the use of expert referees. Next slide. And more in particular, the committee can take four type of different decision. It can, of course, inscribe a property on the World Heritage List. It can refer the nomination back to the state party. It can defer the examination of the nomination, or it can also not to inscribe. In case a decision not to inscribe is taken, it means that this nomination cannot come back again. But next slide, just to go a little bit more in depth of what is one of the most frequently asked questions, and in a few words, really, in a nutshell, what are the difference between referral and deferral? In a referral, what is requested is just an additional minor or supplementary information, which could be resubmitted within 3 years following the decision, and the decision is taken. And what is important also to recall is that there's no mission which is needed in the case of referral. In the case of deferral, it is required a more in-depth assessment or study and a substantial revision, which means that the nomination needs to be resubmitted in a different version, presenting different arguments, probably a different comparative analysis, sometimes also different criteria, different boundaries. So it's quite a substantial difference. And these two mechanisms, as you can see, are very different. The deferral also include the possibility of a new evaluation mission. They are both complementary, and they should be used very much carefully. These different mechanisms are very well defined in the operational guidelines, and should be seen as a way to develop nomination that in the end will lead to successful inscription. But what is really important to recall is that based on experience of many cases that happened over the last session of the committee, it's never a good idea to turn actually a deferral into a referral. Next slide. This is what we call the famous poisoned apple, because member of the committee thinks they are doing a gift to the state party in providing a faster track for inscription through referral. But when a recommendation of the advisory body is based on the assumption that there's a need for a substantial revision, so as we have seen, a substantial revision of the nomination with new boundaries and maybe different criteria and so on, this means that this cannot be turned into the framework of a referral, which is really not adequate to evaluate these sites, these nominations. And when they come back eventually, they have again another problem. So actually, instead of going on a faster track, their way to a potential inscription is even slower down. So with this, I can stop here. Thank you, Joe.
Thank you very much, Alessandro. And to to make that point in a more clear way, what we thought we would do is we would give you a case study specifically from a state party, in this case, the state party of Italy. And this presentation is going to explain why, in this particular case, it was better to take the slower process, let's say, of heading toward an inscription rather than rushing ahead and doing it in a quicker way. So we've never done this before, actually, having presentations directly from states parties, but it's something that you, the committee, have asked us to do in the past, and so we're very happy to be able to do that, this time. So the two presenters from Italy are going to be Adele Cese and Francesca Riccio, and there will also be a small video after they make their presentation. So I will give the floor over to them now.
Hello, good morning. My name is Adele Cesi, and I'm the national focal point for the implementation of the World Heritage Convention in Italy. Next slide, please. We have been asked to present the recommendation of deferral. So, next slide, please. First of all, what about we? It means that who are we? We are members of the Italian delegation, as well as we are experts of the World Heritage Convention, and again, experts in conservation of monuments. Next slide, please. Where we come from? We come from the UNIT, UNESCO office of the Ministry of Cultural Heritage and Activities and Tourism, where there is a pool of experts, architects, archaeologists, and ethnoanthropologists dealing with the implementation of the World Heritage Convention together with the two UNESCO Conventions of 2003 and 2005. We do it through some actions, in particular coordination, communication, monitoring, and technical support. Next slide, please. Our role in particular is to promote a better understanding between the World Heritage Center, ICOMOS, and the World Heritage Committee, and the institution and the so-called civil societies involved in the proposal. Next slide. So, we are here to present this case, but with a little forward. That means that we had two different experiences of deferral recently. So next slide, please. Case one, what I called it approaching deferral with hesitation. It refers to the nomination of Longobards in Italy, Places of the Power, presented in 2008, deferred in 2009, when Italy decided to withdraw the nomination. So we decided to stop the procedure. We withdrawn the nomination. We represented in 2010 a new nomination, endorsing most of the advices of ICOMOS recommendation. And
dans le document 7 qui vous a été distribué. Diapo suivant. Alors, les biens qui seront pour discussion cette année pendant le comité sont présentés dans le document INF 7 Rêve. Il y a 41 rapports cette année, 28 sur des biens en péril, dont un qui est proposé pour être retiré de la liste en péril, et 13 autres biens, dont 5 proposés pour inscription sur la liste en péril. Les débats sur les états de conservation auront lieu le 4 juillet pour les sites en péril et les 5 et 6 juillet pour les autres biens. Diapo suivant. Alors pour l'examen des rapports SOC, vous aurez besoin de lire un certain nombre de documents conjointement. Diapo suivant. Donc voilà, vous devrez prendre connaissance des rapports soumis par les États parties, des rapports de mission et des décisions antérieures adoptées sur les différents biens, ainsi bien sûr que les rapports SOC préparés par le secrétariat et les organisations consultatives et qui sont disponibles dans les documents 7A, 7A-AD, 7A-AD2 pour les biens en péril et 7B, 7B-AD et 7B-AD2 pour les autres biens. Diapo suivant. Tous les documents sont disponibles sur le site internet qui est indiqué en haut de votre écran. sous l'onglet Documents. Diapo suivant. Comme vous le savez sans doute également, tous les rapports SOC présentés cette année au comité sont également disponibles dans la base de données sur l'état de conservation des biens. Et si vous allez sur la page qui est indiquée en haut des écrans, vous trouverez un raccourci qui vous emmène directement sur la version électronique des rapports présentés cette année à la 41e session. Diapo suivante. Alors, dans le cadre du suivi réactif, vos responsabilités en tant que membre du comité sont immenses. Il n'y a pas de défi aussi important à relever que de prendre les décisions les plus justes et les plus efficaces pour la conservation des biens du patrimoine mondial. Diapo suivante. Donc, vous pourrez décider, dans certains cas, qu'aucune action supplémentaire n'est requise lorsque l'état de conservation du bien est satisfaisant. Vous pourrez également décider de la mise en place de mesures spécifiques dans un délai raisonnable lorsque nécessaire. Vous pourrez également décider de demander à l'État partie de soumettre un rapport dans 2 ans, dans 3 ans ou l'année prochaine si les mesures, si l'état de conservation le nécessite. Vous pourrez également décider de demander des missions sur le terrain. Diapo suivante. Si l'état de conservation d'un bien s'est détérioré à un point tel que sa valeur universelle exceptionnelle est sérieusement menacée, alors vous pourrez également décider d'inscrire ce bien sur la liste du patrimoine mondial en péril. A l'inverse, si l'état de ce bien s'est suffisamment amélioré au point que sa valeur universelle exceptionnelle ne soit plus menacée, vous pourrez donc décider de retirer ce bien de la liste du patrimoine mondial en péril, ou si sa valeur universelle exceptionnelle s'est irréversiblement compromise, vous pourrez décider de retirer le bien de la liste du patrimoine mondial. Mes collègues de l'UICN vont à présent vous présenter plus en détail les procédures d'inscription sur la liste en péril, et leur présentation sera suivie d'une vidéo qui présente les bénéfices de l'inscription d'un bien sur la liste en péril. Je vous remercie.
Thank you, Richard. And I give the floor now to Tim Badman of IUCN.
So thanks again, Joe, and thanks to Richard. Just a few slides on the formal aspects of the list of World Heritage in Danger. Next slide, please. So we won't take you through a lot of words on slides in these few slides, but firstly to note that in the operational guidelines, section 4B, you'll find the paragraphs that relate to the list of World Heritage in Danger. And I think the point I would just want to emphasize for the committee is please, whenever there's a discussion of a site in danger, do refer to the requirements for the danger list and the criteria that are set for considering a site to be put on the danger list. The committee can consider that in situations when there is either ascertained danger, that is a case where we can see that significant losses in values are actually occurring, or in situations where there is potential danger, where it is clear that the serious risk of losses to values is demonstrated and in place. And so whenever we make a recommendation for a site to be included on the list in danger, you'll see the reference to those relevant criteria in the operational guidelines. And if you have any doubts on the reasons that a site is recommended, please bring up in the debate any questions about the degree to which we've been able to determine that those criteria are met. It's then important to really emphasize the key message about the committee adding a site to the list in danger. This is the second list that the Convention establishes alongside the World Heritage List, and the goal of this list is to identify when a call to action is needed, where international support or greater international attention to the national responsibilities for a site is required, where significant losses to values might take place. The list in danger is not intended as a way to criticise states parties. It's not intended to be any type of list of things to be ashamed of. It is exactly about mobilising the support that the Convention was founded to bring forward. And as Joking said, the Convention is about the international responsibility to assure protection And the list in danger is really the measure of sites where that protection need is urgent. If I then just ask for the next slide. If you then look at what is required when the committee adopts a site on the danger list. So firstly, there is a need to determine the measures that a state party should put in place to correct the situation and to set a time frame for the application of those measures. So please look to the action that is needed and the timeline which that action should be taken on. And the next slide, please. The other key requirement when a site is put on the list in danger is to set a measure of the condition that a site should achieve to recover the values or correct the situation. So we asked the committee to adopt a desired state of conservation for the removal of this site from the list in danger. This is something that should be adopted by the committee, but it should be prepared jointly with the state party, with the input of the advisory bodies, and that will give you a statement of the condition, either in terms of the management and protection being re-established or the values and integrity of the site or authenticity of the site being restored, that the state party should achieve to then be able to return for a recommendation for a site to be removed from the list. It's a source of 7A where this process has been achieved, and a site that is currently on the danger list we consider can be recommended to be removed from the danger list by the World Heritage Committee. We'll come to that under item 7A during the course of the business ahead, but you will be able to see that type of situation being presented to you this year. From this point, there is another video, which is a testimonial of the danger list in practice with a state party that's prepared a statement for you, and I think that's what we'll pass to next. Thank you.
All right, I think it's ready to go.
Creado en 1973, el Parque Nacional Natural Los Catíos tiene una superficie total de 72.000 hectáreas y está ubicado en el noroccidente de Colombia, en la región del Darién y Urabá, en los departamentos de Chocó y Antioquia. Limita en el occidente con Panamá, específicamente con el Parque Nacional del Darién, con el que comparte el título de Patrimonio Mundial Natural y Reserva de la Biosfera. Por esto, es también un paso importante para millones de especies y representa un legado cultural invaluable. El parque tiene conexión directa de un complejo de ciénagas y humedales con selva muy húmeda tropical. Tiene ríos muy importantes como el Atrato, Cacarica y Pelle, y un alto grado de endemismo y biodiversidad. Por ejemplo, a pesar de representar una pequeña área del territorio colombiano, tiene cerca del 30% de las aves registradas para el país.
Para las comunidades étnicas, indígenas y afrodescendientes, el Parque Los Catíos tiene un significado muy interesante, no solo porque de allí derivan unos y otros su supervivencia, sino porque tiene una importancia de tipo cultural y espiritual. Para ellos, el Parque Los Catíos tiene muchos sitios sagrados que le aportan a su riqueza espiritual.
Por estos motivos, que hacen del área protegida un sitio excepcional en cuanto a procesos ecológicos y biológicos, fue declarada Sitio de Patrimonio Natural Mundial por la UNESCO en 1994. Asimismo, el parque tiene una rica variedad de ecosistemas, incluyendo bosques tropicales y pantanosos, colinas bajas y planicies aluviales, que constituyen hábitats naturales para la conservación in situ de la diversidad biológica. Por su ubicación estratégica y aislada, el sitio es refugio para una gran cantidad de especies, 450 de aves, más de 550 de vertebrados y 669 de plantas.
gracias a todo ese trabajo que realizan los funcionarios del parque, nos ayudan a nosotros y el tema de la conservación de los recursos hidrobiológicos y los recursos pesqueros que se encuentran al interior del parque.
En el pasado, el impacto de la deforestación, la degradación de ecosistemas estratégicos como los humedales, la reconversión de los suelos para usos como agricultura dentro y fuera del parque, el conflicto social con comunidades reasentadas en él y la imposibilidad del Estado de ejercer de manera segura la autoridad ambiental en el territorio, sumado a las amenazas por posibles megaproyectos atravesando el área, afectaron la integridad del área protegida. Es así como el gobierno de Colombia, luego de consultas con el Centro de Patrimonio Mundial y la Unión Internacional para la Conservación de la Naturaleza, en su rol de órgano asesor para sitios naturales, solicitó en el año 2009 al Comité de Patrimonio Mundial la inclusión del área dentro de la lista de sitios de patrimonio mundial en peligro. Se enfatizó la necesidad de movilizar apoyos a nivel local, regional, nacional e internacional para resolver la situación que ponía en riesgo el valor universal excepcional del sitio Patrimonio Mundial. Durante los siguientes años, Parques Nacionales Naturales de Colombia desarrolló un esquema de medidas correctivas, el cual se denominó Plan de Choque con las siguientes acciones estratégicas. Mejorar la actividad de control y vigilancia, mejorando la infraestructura, la asignación de personal y la articulación con la fuerza pública. Generar acuerdos de uso y manejo de recursos naturales con las comunidades afrodescendientes que utilizan los recursos naturales. Generar un proceso de reconocimiento a las comunidades indígenas que se encuentran al interior y en la zona de influencia del área. Hacer una gestión interinstitucional con las alcaldías, las corporaciones regionales y las entidades del sector pesquero para articular acciones en la defensa y protección del parque. Hacer una gestión para incidir en que los proyectos de infraestructura no afectaran el área protegida.
Esta estrategia también involucró definitivamente a la comunidad local, a las autoridades locales, para poder superar los problemas del parque. Ellos entendieron también que estando en la lista de patrimonio en peligro debían participar activamente en las estrategias que llevaran a superar los problemas para lograr que el comité de la UNESCO decidiera sacarlo de la lista de patrimonio en peligro.
Este proceso ha sido muy interesante porque ha sido una estrategia desde la unidad de parques nacionales en donde se ha integrado mucho con las comunidades, no solamente mirando el parque como un objeto intocable e impenetrable pues hacia las áreas como tal, sino que han venido haciendo durante mucho tiempo y nosotros hemos sido acompañantes en algunas actividades. Se ha venido haciendo un trabajo muy interesante con las comunidades con influencia directa en el parque, las que están en la zona de amortiguamiento, algunas que viven al interior del parque, y eso ha permitido una compenetración muy importante, una articulación fuerte entre las comunidades y la institucionalidad.
La comunidad entre todos, el territorio colectivo de los pueblos negros, estuvimos una relación conjunta con el Parque Nacional, tanto los pueblos indígenas que están más cercanos del parque, hicimos una actividad con la comunidad, llevando el proceso como de concientizar a las personas de la misma comunidad más cercana o alrededor del parque, como el pueblo indígena, Cunadule, que está más cercana, y el territorio colectivo.
Este plan fue posteriormente revisado y ajustado en el marco de la misión de evaluación de la UICN realizada en el año 2011 y se establecieron actividades adicionales, así como indicadores específicos para responder ante las amenazas reportadas. Con base en este nuevo plan de actividades, se estableció el estado deseado de conservación, que es el mapa de ruta formalmente considerado por la UNESCO para demostrar el progreso en alcanzar las metas. Una o varias estrategias fueron identificadas para mitigar cada una de estas amenazas. Se articularon alianzas, procesos, recursos y personal de distintas autoridades y organizaciones con miras a superar el estado crítico y alcanzar nuevamente el estatus de protección deseado. Como parte de este proceso, se elaboró también la Declaración Retrospectiva de Valor Universal Excepcional, la cual rescata los principales valores, integridad, manejo y perspectivas a largo plazo acerca del sitio. Una suerte de carta de presentación en la que se resaltan las cualidades por las que es considerado patrimonio de la humanidad. Tras el arduo trabajo de recuperación, siguiendo las recomendaciones del comité y como paso definitivo para alcanzar la meta de retirar al parque de la lista en peligro, se invitó a una misión de evaluación reactiva por parte de la UICN a comienzos del año 2015. De acuerdo a las observaciones y hallazgos del experto de la misión, se recomendó la salida del parque de la categoría en peligro, considerando que las intervenciones en el área protegida habían dado frutos en materia de conservación.
Para Colombia, la inclusión del Parque Nacional en la lista de patrimonio en peligro es una oportunidad. No lo hemos tomado nunca como un castigo. Hemos analizado los postulados de la Convención y nos damos cuenta de que es la oportunidad para diseñar una estrategia que nos lleve a superar los problemas del parque.
En este sentido, en el marco de la 39ª sesión del Comité de Patrimonio Mundial de la UNESCO, celebrado en junio de 2015, se adoptó la decisión de retirar el Parque Nacional Natural Los Catíos de la lista de patrimonio en peligro.
Consideramos que se han hecho unos esfuerzos interdisciplinarios. Inicialmente las mismas personas del parque le han puesto todo el interés para que realmente en el parque vuelva a ser lo que realmente debe de ser. Todo esto también ha surtido un efecto muy importante porque también ha permitido de que regrese la seguridad al parque.
La decisión reconoció los esfuerzos del Estado colombiano para lograr el estado deseado de conservación, superando la adversidad y cohesionando socialmente el territorio, lo cual sin duda constituye un avance fundamental en el manejo efectivo y la gobernanza equitativa del área protegida.
Así se hizo y creo que con éxito pudimos superar la mayoría de los problemas más graves que tenía el Parque Nacional. Nuestro compromiso ahora es seguirlo manejando de manera efectiva con la autoridad regional y local y parques nacionales cuidando nuestro Parque Nacional Patrimonio de la Humanidad.
Para que el parque esté en donde está, necesitamos que el gobierno lo siga apoyando, así como lo está haciendo ahora o con más fuerza, para que así también el parque apoye a nuestra comunidad para salir adelante, porque queremos que el parque fortalezca también los proyectos que ha dado o que se den otros proyectos para la comunidad de Tumaradó y para otras también.
Hay otro aspecto que es muy importante, es el de control y vigilancia. Yo creo que cada vez todos aquellos que están metidos en el tráfico se las van ingeniando, entonces no podemos creer que ya tenemos solucionado el problema por nuestro aplicativo y digamos que por la articulación que tenemos con Chocó y Corpourabá. Tenemos que ser todavía más sagaces y estar revisando que efectivamente lo que está haciendo documental corresponda a la realidad y eso significa más seguimiento en campo.
Todo lo anterior no habría sido ni será posible sin el trabajo del equipo de Parques Nacionales Naturales de Colombia, que desde las distintas competencias y capacidades ha dispuesto de los recursos requeridos para alcanzar estos logros, preservar la salud de los ecosistemas y los beneficios para la comunidad de los departamentos de Antioquia y Chocó, cruciales en todo el proceso para avanzar el plan de choque y con quienes será fundamental trabajar frente a los mencionados retos en beneficio de los colombianos y a disposición de toda la humanidad.
Okay, thank you again to Richard, to Tim, and actually to this excellent film. I think this really does give us a sense of the fact that putting something on the danger list is actually a step which potentially has very positive consequences if states parties are interested in developing this and working together with partners at the international level, at the national level, and at the local level. With that, I will finish this section on state of conservation reporting, and I will ask if there are any questions from committee members. Again, I don't see any. Actually, we're getting toward the end anyway, so that's just as well. So at this point, I'd like to close out the session. I would like to thank all of you for having attended this session. One thing I would like to ask you, however, is we will be circulating evaluation forms, and I would really ask each member of the committee to fill out that evaluation form so that we are able to determine whether this new format with the case studies has been effective for you all. So the ECRUM's intern will be coming around and passing those evaluation forms out to you, and we would ask that you please fill them out and get them back to us in the next day or so. At this point, I would like to thank all of our presenters and all of the members of the committee that have been here, and just remind you that at 6:30 buses will be leaving for the opening ceremony, and I hope you all have your tickets, because you do need to have your tickets. But this gives you about an hour to go back and change if you need to change, or do whatever it is that you need to do. So thank you all very much, and we look forward to a very fruitful and successful 41st session of the World Heritage Committee. Thank you.